And we're happy to be joined once again by the fabulous Dr. Galit Ben Tovel, an Egyptologist and author of the book Messiah Code. Hello and welcome back, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Emily.
It's always a pleasure. First, let's start with some news that just made news in scientific journals about researchers and scientists that have been able to take DNA of Pharaoh Ramses II and generate a model of what he looked like. Talk about why this is so interesting and why mummifying these pharaohs is leading to us being able to actually DNA test these bodies today.
So first of all, the whole science around mummification is great because we can learn not only about their DNA, but we can really learn how they looked like, about their disease, the habits, what they ate. And we have a whole idea of how these Egyptians look like. It's very interesting because we have all these burials and all these mummies. And the riddle of these ancient people and to see how they look like maybe can also help us to trace, you know, the race of today back then to Egypt.
Wow, wow. Now, also, you just listened to the interview with Dexter, who,
yes.
I mean, what a coincidence. He's a friend of a friend. He comes to Israel and just has discovered this. So what do you make of that? You look at him, you've been to Egypt, you've seen mummies. What do you make of this resemblance and proving it in DNA?
So first of all, we know also from the ancient inscription that the Egyptian, we have different races that were part of this Egyptian culture and nation. So we have one that is from the Delta, Lower Egypt. They were more short and curly, more like the Yemenite, if you want. And we have another race of the ancient Egyptian coming from the upper side of Egypt, lower from the Delta. We call it the Upper Egypt. They are more like Dexter. They're more like Sudan, tall. I would say black, you know, that, and here the combination of these two races, and maybe there were even more, but they were taller than the one in the Delta. So but just by looking at Dexter, which is fascinating, his personal story, we can definitely see also some trace, if I can say, physically and visually.
Wow. And
it's always fascinating to see how, you know, people looked like 5,000 years ago.
So when this DNA test says, okay, direct descendant of Ramses III. I mean, it's not like we're going to say, do a DNA and say direct descendant of Abraham. You know, the fact they could actually prove it with DNA because we have the mummies. What do we know about Ramses III?
So what do we know about this person? As first of all, it was the second pharaoh of the 20th dynasty. We call it the last great pharaoh of the ancient Egyptian civilization. In his time, he suffered from external problems, challenges, and also internal one. He was invaded by the sea people in his 8 reigns of succession. We have the battle in Medinet Habu temple when he described his victory over the sea people and also over the Libyans. But we also know that he was suffered by different strikes that happened during his reign because he was so much, you know, invested in wars and battles. So the treasury of the ancient Egyptian suffered from that. So we have a record of the first, I can say, labor strike that happened in his time, in his reign, in his year of 29.
So also explain the Ramses, that even Ramses II, the one we think is the Ramses from the Ten Commandments story, that actually is not true from your research of the Ramses during the Jewish exile and the Exodus?
Well, I thought at the beginning, like other Egyptologists, the one that think that the story really happened, that maybe it's Ramses II, and I understand the confusion because in the Bible we say that we came out of Egypt and also that we built 2 cities in Egypt. We built Pitom and we also built Ramses. And the fact that we mentioned the second city as the name of Ramses, you know, people thought, you know, I myself also a scholar, well, it means that the story happened in the time of Ramses, and then we have to think which Ramses. We have Ramses I, we have the second. Of course, now we know that we also have the third, so which one? And for many years, people thought that maybe it's Ramses II because it was the most prominent one. He led many victories. It was the toughest one. But I believe today that it's not the case. I believe that the city was called Ramses because the story was written in the time of Ramses II, and this is when we are referring to a place that bear the same name. It doesn't mean that it happened in the same time.
Wow, interesting. So what do we even know about these pharaohs? Like you're saying that Ramses III, for example, is one of the last great pharaohs. So where in the timeline do we believe you can search it, but obviously
Yes,
the
so-
timeline is a little different than what
Definitely.
we're Googling.
So when we are talking about Ramses III, we are talking about 1186 BC to 1550 BC. Okay. By the way, he was murdered. I don't know if it's important
was
to say,
murdered?
but he was murdered by one of his wives.
Wow.
So there was a whole plot against him. He survived one plot, but the second probably was. We know it, by the way, from his mummy. His mummy is really cut in the throat. So we even see, the place of the knife.
Wow.
So he was murder and assassin. But if we are talking about the time of Exodus, I believe that it happened in the time of the king and the prince Ahmose, Ahmose I, which is 1550 BC, 18th dynasty. Ramses II, just to make an order for the audience as well, is dynasty 19. So we are talking here about three dynasties, the 18th dynasty, 19th, and the 20th, which is the dynasty of Dexter, Ramses III. And I know that there is some confusion, and I know that Egyptologists are going even earlier than the 18th. Some will think that Exodus even took place in the 12th dynasty, but as I wrote in my book, Messiah Code, I believe it was Ahmose.
It's so interesting. Wow, this is just continues to be interesting. I can't wait to uncover more. Dr. Galit Ben Tovel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Always
Thank
a
you,
pleasure.
Emily.